The late afternoon sun hung low over Wilmington, North Carolina, painting the sidewalks in a warm honeyed glow. It was one of those September days when the air felt soft, like a promise, and the scent of pine trees mixed with the faint saltiness of the nearby Cape Fear River. On 4th Street, the heart of the city's historic district, life moved at an unhurried pace. Barbershop conversations spilled onto the street, kids rode bikes in lazy circles, and the occasional car rumbled past, its tires humming against the asphalt. For Lydia Harper, 27 years old and 8 months pregnant, it was just another day, one filled with small joys and quiet hopes. Lydia walked slowly, her steps careful but steady, one hand resting on the curve of her belly where her unborn child stirred. In her other hand, she clutched a small paper bag of oranges, their bright skins peeking through the top. She'd picked them up from a corner market on her way home from her shift at the public library, where she worked shelving books and helping kids with their homework. The oranges were for Malcolm, her husband of 3 years. He loved them, always peeling one absent-mindedly while reading the news or talking about his day at the Veteran Counseling Center. He ran a few blocks away. Tonight, she planned to surprise him with his favorite dinner, shrimp and grits, rich and buttery, just like his grandmother used to make. She could already picture his tired smile, the way his shoulders would relax as he leaned back in their creaky kitchen chair, the world's weight lifting for a moment. Her phone buzzed in her pocket and she fished it out, balancing the bag of oranges against her hip. It was Malcolm. "Hey, you still at the library?" His voice crackled through, warm but edged with the fatigue of a long day. "Nope, on my way home," Lydia replied, a smile tugging at her lips. "You better not be late, Malcolm Harper. I'm cooking tonight and I'm not reheating grits for you." He laughed low and easy. "Yes, ma'am. You need anything from the store?" "Milk," she said, stepping carefully over a crack in the sidewalk. "We're out, and I'm not drinking my tea black tomorrow." "Got it. Milk. Anything else, boss?" She chuckled, about to answer when a loud horn blared behind her. Lydia spun around, her heart lurching as a delivery truck swerved too close to the curb, its tires screeching. The driver, a young guy with a baseball cap, leaned out the window yelling, "Watch where you're going, lady." The truck's side mirror missed her by inches, the wind from its speed ruffling her scarf. Her oranges slipped from her grasp, the bag tearing as they rolled across the pavement like bright, runaway marbles. Lydia stumbled back, her hand flying to her belly, her breath catching. The baby kicked hard, a sharp jab that felt like a warning. I'm okay," she whispered to herself, or maybe to the child, her voice trembling. She bent down, wincing as she tried to gather the scattered oranges, her swollen ankles protesting. A few passers-by glanced her way but kept walking, their faces blank or distracted. Wilmington wasn't a cold city, but it had its moments of indifference, especially when the day was winding down and everyone was eager to get home. She didn't notice the police cruiser until it was too late. It rolled up slowly, its engine growling like a predator sizing up its prey. The black and white vehicle stopped abruptly, tires screeching slightly, just a few feet from where Lydia knelt. She froze, her fingers still wrapped around an orange, her pulse quickening. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped Officer Travis Morrow, 37 years old, broad-shouldered and pale, his short-sleeve uniform pressed crisp despite the humidity. His eyes, hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, locked onto her. "Ma'am, stand up," he barked, his voice sharp like he was addressing a suspect, not a pregnant woman picking up fruit. Lydia blinked, confused, her mind still reeling from the near miss with the truck. She rose slowly, clutching the torn bag, her other hand resting protectively on her belly. "I'm just picking up my groceries," she said, her voice soft, careful. She'd learned that tone long ago, the one you used to avoid trouble, to keep things calm. Her eyes flickered to his badge, then away, not wanting to seem defiant. Morrow stepped closer, his boots heavy on the pavement. "You causing a scene out here?" he snapped, his hand hovering near his holster. "I saw that truck. You're blocking the sidewalk, making a mess." Lydia's breath caught. Blocking the sidewalk? She glanced around. 4th Street was wide, empty except for a few parked cars and a kid on a skateboard half a block away. "Sir, I wasn't blocking anything," she said, keeping her voice low. "The truck almost hit me. I just dropped my oranges." "Don't get smart with me," Morrow cut in, his tone hardening. He took another step, close enough that she could smell the faint tang of his aftershave. "You look like you're loitering, standing around causing trouble. That's suspicious." The word suspicious hit her like a slap. Lydia felt her stomach tighten, the baby kicking again, as if sensing the danger in the air. She'd heard stories about Morrow whispers in the library break room, murmurs at the grocery store. He was the kind of cop who made your heart race when his cruiser passed by, the kind who saw threat in every black face, every raised eyebrow. And now here he was, his eyes boring into her like she was a criminal, not a librarian walking home. "I'm not loitering," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "I'm just trying to get home to my husband." She took a small step back, her sandal catching on the uneven pavement. "Stop moving!" Morrow shouted, his face reddening. "You hear me? Stop right there." Lydia froze, her whole body tensing. She wasn't moving, not really, but his voice made it feel like she'd committed a crime. Her hand tightened on her belly, the baby's kicks growing frantic. "I'm not arguing," she whispered, barely audible. "Please, sir, I'm pregnant." That word please seemed to ignite something ugly in him. Without warning, Morrow lunged forward, shoving her hard with both hands. Lydia stumbled backward, her feet slipping on the scattered oranges. She tried to catch herself, but the pavement rushed up to meet her. She hit the ground with a sickening thud, her hands flying to her belly to shield the child inside. Pain exploded through her hips, her back, her stomach. The bag of oranges tore completely, the fruit rolling into the gutter. But Morrow wasn't done. His face twisted with rage, he stepped forward and in one brutal motion, kicked her square in the stomach. The sound wasn't loud, a dull, muffled impact, but it was final, like the closing of a door. Lydia's scream tore through the quiet street, raw and piercing, like thunder cracking a clear sky. She curled into herself, hands wrapped around her belly, eyes wide with disbelief and terror. The pain was unlike anything she'd ever felt, a white-hot wave that stole her breath. She couldn't move, couldn't think. All she could do was pray the baby was still alive. Bystanders froze. A woman across the street gasped, her hand covering her mouth. A teenage boy on a skateboard pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he hit record. An older man shouted, "Hey, stop that. She's pregnant." But no one stepped in. No one dared. The woman yelled again, "Call 911. Oh my God, call 911. Her voice cracked with panic. Morrow turned his back, as if nothing had happened. He adjusted his belt, muttered something into his radio, and climbed back into his cruiser. To him, Lydia was nothing, just another name on a report. Another face to forget. The cruiser's engine roared to life and he pulled away, leaving her crumpled on the pavement, her scarf tangled in the dirt, her oranges scattered like evidence of a crime. But the cameras were rolling. The teenager's video, shaky but clear, captured every second: the shove, the kick, Lydia's scream, Morrow's indifference. Another bystander, a woman in her 40s, filmed from across the street, her phone held high as she narrated in a trembling voice. "This is happening right now. Wilmington PD. She's pregnant. He just kicked her." The footage was brutal, undeniable, and within minutes it was uploaded to X with the caption, "Wilmington cop attacks pregnant black woman. Say her name, Lydia Harper." Lydia lay on the pavement, her vision blurring as pain pulsed through her. She whispered to her baby, "Hold on, please hold on." She didn't know if she was bleeding, didn't know if the kicks had stopped. All she could feel was fear, sharp and heavy, sitting in her bones. The sound of sirens grew closer, but they felt far away, like they belonged to someone else's emergency. At the Veteran Counseling Center 3 blocks away, Malcolm Harper was finishing a session with a client, a young Marine struggling with PTSD. His phone buzzed on the desk, but he ignored it, focusing on the man in front of him. When it buzzed again, then a third time, he glanced at the screen. An unknown number. He frowned, excused himself, and answered. "This is Malcolm Harper." "Mr. Harper, this is Nurse Reynolds at New Hanover Regional," a woman's voice said, urgent but controlled. "Your wife Lydia has been brought in. She's in critical condition. She's asking for you." Malcolm's world tilted. "Critical condition," he repeated, his voice hollow. "What happened? Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" "She was attacked, sir," the nurse said, her words careful but heavy. "She's stable for now, but you need to get here. She needs you." Attacked. The word didn't make sense. Malcolm's hand tightened around the phone, his knuckles paling. What do you mean attacked?" "I don't have all the details," the nurse said. "Please just come quickly." Malcolm didn't remember ending the call. He didn't remember grabbing his keys or telling his assistant to cancel the rest of his appointments. All he remembered was running out the door into his beat-up Ford pickup, the engine roaring as he sped through a red light, his heart pounding louder than the sirens he passed. The hospital was only a 10-minute drive, but it felt like a lifetime. His mind raced with images of Lydia, her laugh, her gentle hands folding baby clothes, the way she hummed gospel songs when she thought no one was listening. She couldn't be in critical condition. She was Lydia, his Lydia, the woman who made everything make sense. New Hanover Regional loomed ahead, its glass doors reflecting the fading sunlight. Malcolm parked crookedly, barely locking the truck before sprinting inside. The emergency room was chaos, beeping monitors, hurried voices, the sharp smell of antiseptic. He pushed past a security guard, his voice breaking as he demanded, "Lydia Harper. Where is she?" "I'm her husband." A nurse pointed him to room 403. Malcolm ran, his boots slamming against the tile floor, nearly colliding with a crash cart in the hallway. When he reached the room, he stopped dead. Lydia lay in the bed, pale against the white sheets, her face bruised, her lips split. Monitors beeped steadily, their green lines a fragile promise that she was still here. Her belly rose and fell with shallow breaths, the baby still with her for now. "Lydia." His voice cracked, small and unfamiliar. He stepped closer, his hands trembling as he reached for her. She turned her head slowly, her swollen eyes finding his. "Malcolm," she whispered, her voice barely there. "He kicked me. He kicked me." Those words hit like a freight train. Malcolm's knees buckled, and he caught the edge of the bed to keep from falling. For a moment, the Marine in him, the man who'd survived ambushes in Afghanistan, who'd learned to bury fear under discipline, vanished. He was just a husband, a father-to-be, staring at the woman he loved, broken and bruised because someone saw her as less than human. "Who?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. "Who did this?" "A cop," she said, her eyes glistening. "Officer Morrow. I was just walking home. I didn't do anything, Malcolm. I swear I didn't." "I know you didn't," he said, his jaw clenching. He took her hand, her fingers cold and trembling in his. "I'm here. I got you." But inside something was breaking. Something raw, something unstoppable. Lydia's eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion pulling her under, but Malcolm couldn't look away. He saw the bruise blooming across her cheek, the 4-line tape to her arm, the way her hand rested on her belly even now, protecting their child. The doctor came in, a woman with gray hair and a clipped tone. She explained the injury's blunt force trauma, risk of placental abruption, the baby's heartbeat steady but under close watch. Malcolm nodded, but the words blurred together. All he could see was Lydia, lying there because someone with a badge decided she didn't matter. As the doctor left, Malcolm's phone buzzed again. A text from his cousin in Raleigh. "Yo, you seen this? It's all over X." A link followed. Malcolm opened it, his hands shaking. The video loaded, a grainy but unmistakable 40 seconds of hell. Lydia walking, Morrow shouting, the shove, the kick, her scream. The footage ended with her curled on the pavement, hands on her belly, oranges scattered around her like a crime scene. The caption read, "Wilmington PD brutality. This is Lydia Harper. She's 8 months pregnant." Malcolm watched it again, then again, each time noticing something new: the twitch in Morrow's jaw, the way Lydia's scarf fluttered as she fell, the resignation in the bystanders' faces, like they'd seen this before. His stomach churned, rage and grief twisting together. By the time he looked up, the video had 10,000 shares. By the time he stepped outside for air, it had 50,000. Outside the hospital, the world was waking up. A few candles appeared on the steps, placed by strangers who'd seen the video. A woman in a church hat prayed quietly, her hands clasped tight. A college student held a sign, "Justice for Lydia." Malcolm stood at the hospital's third-floor window, watching them gather. 5 people, then 10, then 20. His phone buzzed again, a call from an unknown number. He ignored it, his eyes fixed on the crowd below. This wasn't just about Lydia anymore. It was about every woman like her, every mother, every black family who'd ever felt the weight of a system that refused to see them. Malcolm's hand tightened into a fist. He didn't know what came next, but he knew one thing. Travis Morrow had made a mistake. He'd kicked the wrong woman. And Malcolm Harper wasn't going to let it slide. The hospital lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the tiled floors of New Hanover Regional. It was just past midnight, and the emergency wing had settled into a restless quiet, broken only by the soft beeps of monitors and the occasional shuffle of nurses' shoes. Malcolm Harper sat in a stiff plastic chair beside Lydia's bed. His broad shoulders hunched, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles ached. Lydia slept fitfully, her bruised face half hidden by the oxygen tube taped to her cheek. The monitors tracked her vitals, their green lines of fragile thread tying her to life, to their unborn child. Malcolm's eyes never left her, as if watching could keep her safe, could undo what had been done. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't even taken a sip of the coffee a nurse had left on the tray table. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a constant hum of notifications, texts, calls, voicemails from cousins, co-workers, strangers. The video of Lydia's attack was everywhere now, shared thousands of times on X, reposted with hashtags like Justice for Lydia and Wilmington PD brutality. Each buzz felt like a spark, feeding the fire in his chest. Rage, grief, helplessness, they churned together, threatening to swallow him whole. But Malcolm was a Marine trained to channel chaos into focus. He'd learned to breathe through fear in war zones, to act when others froze. And now, with his wife lying broken in a hospital bed, he was choosing his next move. The door creaked open and Malcolm's head snapped up. A uniformed officer stepped into the room, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. He was younger than Travis Morrow, maybe late 20s, with a buzz cut and a nervous energy that didn't match his pressed Wilmington PD uniform. "Mr. Harper?" he said, his voice low but official. "I'm Officer Daniels. I need to take a statement from your wife about the incident." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "She's sleeping," he said, his voice a low growl. "She's been through hell. You're not waking her up." Daniels shifted his weight, glancing at Lydia's still form. "I understand, sir, but we need her account for the report. It's procedure." "Procedure?" Malcolm stood, his 6 feet 2 inches frame filling the small room. His voice stayed calm, but there was steel in it. "Your procedure let a cop kick my pregnant wife in the stomach. You want a statement? Watch the damn video. It's all over the internet." Daniel's face flushed, but he held his ground. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Harper. If you don't cooperate, it could complicate things." The word complicate snapped something in Malcolm. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, his fists clenched at his sides. "You're in my wife's hospital room, talking about complications? She's hooked to monitors because of one of your buddies. You want to complicate something? Try me." The air thickened with tension. Daniel's hand twitched toward his radio, his eyes narrowing. "Sir, I need you to calm down or I'll have to." "Enough." A sharp voice cut through the standoff. A nurse, a black woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her braids, pushed past Daniels into the room. Her name tag read Evelyn. "This is a patient's room, not a precinct. Officer, you're upsetting my patient and her family. You need to leave. Now." Daniels hesitated, his jaw working, but Evelyn's stare didn't waver. She planted herself between him and Malcolm, her arms crossed. "I said now," she repeated, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much to back down. Daniels muttered something under his breath, shot Malcolm a hard look, and backed out of the room. The door clicked shut behind him. Malcolm exhaled, his shoulders sagging. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer now. Evelyn waved a hand. "Don't thank me. I've seen their kind come in here before, trying to twist the story before it even starts." She glanced at Lydia, her expression softening. "She's strong. So's that baby. You focus on them. Let the rest sort itself out." But Malcolm couldn't let it sort itself out. Not after what he'd seen in that video. Not after hearing Lydia's whispered words. "He kicked me." As Evelyn left to check on another patient, Malcolm pulled out his phone. The notifications were relentless messages of support, outrage, and a few ugly ones calling Lydia a liar, a troublemaker. He opened X and saw the video had hit 100,000 shares. Comments flooded in. "This is why we don't trust cops. She was just walking home. Wilmington PD, do your job." But there were others, darker ones. "She probably provoked him. Why was she out there anyway? This is fake, just another race card." The lies stung worse than he'd expected. Malcolm's thumb hovered over the screen, his pulse pounding. He wanted to scream, to smash something, to find Travis Morrow and make him feel the pain he'd inflicted. But Lydia didn't need his anger right now. She needed his strength. He scrolled through his contacts and found Nathan Brooks, a friend from his Marine days who traded combat boots for a law degree. They hadn't spoken in years, but Malcolm didn't hesitate. He typed a quick message. Need your help. Cop attacked Lydia. She's in the hospital. This is big. He hit send and waited. By dawn, the hospital was no longer just a place of healing, it was a battleground. Outside, the crowd had grown. Candles lined the steps, their flames flickering in the early morning breeze. Signs bobbed above the gathering. Justice for Lydia. Black Mothers Matter. She was just walking home. Church elders stood shoulder to shoulder with college students, their faces etched with quiet resolve. A local pastor led a prayer, his voice carrying over the hum of passing cars. Malcolm watched from the third-floor window, his breath fogging the glass. He felt something shift inside him, something bigger than his own pain. This wasn't just his fight anymore. His phone buzzed with a reply from Nathan. I'm in. Flying down from DC tonight. Send me everything, idiot. Names, details. Malcolm exhaled, a small weight lifting. Nathan was sharp, relentless, the kind of lawyer who could dismantle a lie with a single question. But even with Nathan on board, Malcolm knew the road ahead was steep. The Wilmington PD hadn't issued a statement, hadn't acknowledged the video, hadn't even named Morrow. Their silence was a wall, and Malcolm was ready to tear it down. He returned to Lydia's room where she was awake, her eyes clearer but still heavy with pain. She gave him a faint smile. You look like you haven't slept in a year, she said, her voice hoarse. Feels like it, Malcolm replied, pulling a chair close. He took her hand, her fingers warmer now but still fragile in his. How you holding up? She shrugged, wincing as the movement tugged at her bruises. The baby's still kicking. That's what matters. Her hand rested on her belly, a small protective gesture. What's happening out there? I heard voices. Malcolm hesitated, then told her the truth: the video, the crowd, the messages pouring in. He left out the hateful ones, the ones calling her a fraud. She didn't need that now. Lydia listened, her eyes drifting to the ceiling. They're out there for me? She asked, almost disbelieving. For you, Malcolm said. For us. For every woman who's ever been hurt like this. She nodded, tears welling but not falling. I don't want to be a symbol, Malcolm. I just want to go home. I know, he said, his voice thick. And we will. But first we make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Lydia squeezed his hand. Just don't lose yourself in this. Promise me. He nodded, but the promise felt heavy. He wasn't sure he could keep it. By midday, the hospital hallway was buzzing with new energy. Reporters had started to arrive, their cameras slung over shoulders, microphones clipped to collars. A nurse warned Malcolm that a local news van was parked outside, waiting for a statement. He wasn't ready to face them, not yet. But the world wasn't waiting. His phone buzzed again, this time with a call from a reporter at the Wilmington Times. Mr. Harper, we're hearing rumors about your wife's past, the woman said, her tone cautious. Some posts on X are saying she's got a history of causing trouble. Care to comment? Malcolm's blood ran cold. Rumors, he repeated, his voice low. You mean lies? My wife was attacked for walking home. You want to comment? Asked the cop who kicked her why he still got a badge. He hung up before she could respond, his hands shaking. He opened X and saw the post she'd mentioned: a handful of anonymous accounts, their profiles blank or filled with generic flags and Bible verses spewing venom. Lydia Harper's no victim. She's been arrested before. Typical troublemaker, playing the race card. That video's edited. She provoked him. The lies were clumsy but dangerous, spreading like weeds. Malcolm's stomach churned. He knew how this worked: mirror the victim, muddy the truth, make the outrage fade. He'd seen it before in news stories about other families, other injustices. But this wasn't someone else's story. This was his wife, his child, his life. He couldn't stay silent. Malcolm opened Instagram, his fingers moving before his mind caught up. He hit the live button, propped his phone on the hospital tray table and sat down in front of it. The screen lit up, his face filling the frame, tired eyes, unshaven jaw, a man carrying a weight no one could see. This is Malcolm Harper, he began, his voice steady but raw. My wife, Lydia, was attacked yesterday by a Wilmington PD officer named Travis Morrow. She's 8 months pregnant. She was just walking home, carrying oranges for me. He pushed her. He kicked her in the stomach. And now she's in a hospital bed, fighting to keep our baby safe. The viewer count climbed 100, 500, 1,000. Comments flooded in. We're with you, Malcolm. This is disgusting. Praying for Lydia. But there were others. Liar. She deserved it. Malcolm ignored them, his eyes locked on the camera. Some of you are spreading lies about my wife, he said, his voice tightening. saying she's a criminal, saying she provoked him. Let me be clear. Lydia's never been arrested. She's a librarian who helps kids read. She's the kind of woman who'd give you her last dollar if you needed it. And yesterday a cop decided she wasn't human. He held up his phone, showing a screenshot of one of the anonymous posts. This is what they're doing, he said. Trying to make you doubt what you saw. But you saw it. The whole world saw it. And I'm asking you to let them twist this. If you've got footage, stories, anything about Travis Morrow or the Wilmington PD, send it to me. We're not letting this go. A notification popped up midstream, a direct message from an account called TruthTeller919. Back off, Harper, or you'll regret it. Malcolm's heart skipped, but he didn't flinch. He read the message aloud, his voice steady. This is what they're afraid of, he said. Us speaking up. Us fighting back. But I'm not scared. Are you? The live stream ended with 5,000 viewers and counting. Within minutes, clips were circulating on X, TikTok, and local news feeds. Malcolm's words, raw, unfiltered, struck a chord. His call for evidence sparked a flood of responses. Blurry videos of Morrow yelling at a teenager in a park, a voice memo from a woman claiming he'd harassed her at a traffic stop, a photo of him smirking at a community meeting. None of it was enough to convict him yet, but it was fuel and Malcolm was building a fire. By evening, Nathan Brooks arrived from D.C., his suitcase still tagged from the airport. He was 32, lean and sharp-eyed, with a fade haircut and a suit that looked expensive but rumpled from the flight. He and Malcolm had served together in Afghanistan, two black Marines navigating a world that didn't always welcome them. Now, Nathan was a civil rights attorney with a reputation for taking on cases others wouldn't touch. He met Malcolm in the hospital cafeteria, the only place quiet enough to talk. The fluorescent lights buzzed above them, casting long shadows across the Formica tables. Tell me everything, Nathan said, his notebook already open. Malcolm did Lydia's attack, the video, the lies on X, the officer in the hospital room, the live stream. Nathan listened, his pen moving fast, his face unreadable. When Malcolm finished, Nathan leaned back, his eyes narrowing. This isn't just about Morrow, he said. He's a symptom. The real fight's with the system that let him do this. I know, Malcolm said. But I need him to pay. For Lydia. For our kid. Nathan nodded. He will. But we're not just going after him. We're going after every supervisor who looked the other way, every report they buried. We need a lawyer who knows the city's dirt. He paused, then grinned faintly. I've got someone in mind. That someone was Clara Mitchell, a 48-year-old civil rights attorney who'd spent 2 decades dismantling corrupt police departments from Charlotte to Atlanta. She arrived the next morning, her presence commanding the hospital's small conference room. Her graying curls were pulled back, her tailored blazer a stark contrast to the chaos around her. She shook Malcolm's hand, her grip firm, her eyes assessing. I've seen the video, she said. It's bad. But it's not enough. We need witnesses, records, patterns. And we need the city to feel the heat. Malcolm nodded, his resolve hardening. What do you need from me? Everything, Clara said. Names of anyone who saw it, any footage you can get, any story about Morrow. And you need to keep talking. The public's on your side now, but that can change. Keep them angry. Keep them loud. Malcolm glanced at Lydia, who'd been wheeled into the room for the meeting. She looked fragile but determined, her hand resting on her belly. I don't want to be the face of this, she said quietly. But if it means no one else goes through this, I'll do it. Clara's expression softened. You're not just the face, Mrs. Harper. You're the heart. Outside, the crowd had doubled. Over 100 people now stood on the hospital lawn, their signs swaying in the breeze. A local radio station played gospel music, its notes drifting over the gathering. A teenager handed out water bottles, her t-shirt reading Lydia's Army. Malcolm stepped outside to address them, his voice amplified by a borrowed megaphone. My wife's in there fighting, he said, his words carrying over the crowd. She's fighting for our baby, for our family. But she's not alone. You're here. And we're not stopping until Travis Morrow and everyone who protected him answers for this. The crowd roared, their applause shaking the air. Malcolm felt the weight of their belief, their anger, their hope. He wasn't just a husband anymore. He was a voice, a spark, a man who'd stepped into a fight bigger than himself. But as he looked back at the hospital at the window where Lydia watched, he knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The system was watching, and it wasn't going to go down easy. The Wilmington dawn broke heavy. the sky streaked with gray clouds that seemed to mirror the city's unease. It was day 3 since Lydia Harper had been attacked, and the air carried a charge like the moment before a storm. Outside New Hanover Regional, the crowd had swelled to nearly 200, their signs and candles now spilling onto the hospital lawn. The hum of gospel music from a portable speaker mixed with murmured prayers, and the occasional shout of a passing car. Malcolm Harper stood at the hospital window, his reflection faint against the glass. His eyes traced the faces below, elders in church hats, students with backpacks, veterans with canes. They weren't just here for Lydia anymore. They were here for something bigger, something that had been simmering in Wilmington for years. Malcolm hadn't slept in days, his body running on coffee and adrenaline. His phone buzzed constantly, messages of support, tips about Travis Morrow, threats from anonymous accounts. The live stream he'd done the day before had gone viral, clips of his raw, unfiltered words looping on X and TikTok. "We're not letting this go," he'd said, and the world had heard him. But the system was listening too, and it was starting to push back. Malcolm felt it in the silence from the Wilmington PD, in the bland statement from City Hall promising an internal review, in the whispers of lies spreading online. This wasn't just a fight for justice anymore. It was a war. Inside Lydia's room, the monitors beeped steadily, a lifeline Malcolm clung to. Lydia was stronger today, her bruises fading, her voice clearer. She sat propped up in bed, her hands resting on her belly, the baby's kicks a quiet reassurance. "They're still out there?" she asked, glancing toward the window. "More every day," Malcolm said, pulling a chair close. "They're not giving up." "Neither are we." Lydia nodded, her eyes distant. "I keep thinking about that moment," she said softly. "When I fell. I told him I was pregnant, Malcolm. I told him, and he didn't care." Malcolm's jaw clenched, his hands tightening into fists. "He's gonna care," he said. "I promise you that." She reached for his hand, her fingers cool but steady. "Just be careful. They're not gonna make this easy." He knew she was right. The system didn't break without a fight, and Malcolm was learning just how deep its roots ran. That morning, Clara Mitchell and Nathan Brooks had set up a makeshift war room in a borrowed office at the hospital. Clara's laptop was open, her desk buried under folders and legal pads. Nathan paced, his phone pressed to his ear, barking questions at a contact in the state attorney's office. They were digging into Travis Morrow's history, and what they'd found so far was a slow-burning fuse. 3 complaints in 5 years, Clara said, sliding a file across the table to Malcolm. 2 for excessive force, both against black residents. 1 was dismissed before it hit a review board. The others? Insufficient evidence. Sound familiar? Malcolm flipped through the pages, his stomach churning. The complaints were detailed: a woman shoved against a car 4, talking back, a teenager pinned to the ground 4, looking suspicious. Both cases had witnesses, both had reports filed, both had vanished into the department's black hole. They knew, Malcolm said, his voice low. They knew he was a problem. They didn't just know, Nathan said, hanging up his phone. They protected him. We found training evaluations marked aggressive and disrespectful. One supervisor wrote he wasn't suited for field work. Guess what? He's still on the street. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. Who signed off on this? That's the fun part, Clara said, her voice sharp. We're working on it. But someone high up made sure these complaints never saw daylight. The weight of it hit Malcolm like a punch. This wasn't just about Morrow. It was about a system that let men like him thrive, that buried the truth to protect its own. He thought of Lydia lying on that sidewalk, her scream echoing in his head. How many others had screamed and been ignored? How many names had been erased? That evening, Clara pulled Malcolm aside in the hospital hallway, her expression grim. She handed him a manila envelope. You need to see this, she said. Inside were anonymous statements from current Wilmington PD officers, smuggled out through a contact Nathan had in the department. The words were typed, no names attached, but they painted a damning picture. One officer wrote, I've seen Morrow harass people for no reason, mostly black folks in the South Side neighborhoods. I reported it once. My sergeant told me to keep my mouth shut. Another, he threw a kid to the ground for asking why he was stopped. I filed a complaint. It disappeared. Malcolm's hands shook as he read. They're all guilty, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Every one of them who stayed quiet. Clara nodded. Which is why we're not just going after Morrow. We're going after the chain of command. The next day, Nathan got a call from an outside research team they'd hired to dig into similar cases across North Carolina. It's not just Wilmington, he told Malcolm over a lukewarm coffee in the cafeteria. We're seeing patterns. Officers with multiple complaints shuffled to new assignments, sent to training until the heat dies down. It's a playbook. Cover up, deflect, wait it out. Malcolm stared out the window, the rain streaking down the glass. How far does it go? Nathan didn't answer right away. Then quietly, far enough that if we keep pushing, we're not just taking down Morrow. We're exposing the whole dam system. Malcolm didn't hesitate. Then we push. Back in Lydia's room, she was sitting up, a tray of untouched hospital food beside her. The nurses were optimistic the baby's heartbeat was steady, the risk of complications dropping. But Lydia still flinched at loud noises, still froze when a security guard passed her door. Malcolm told her about the complaints, the memos, the officers who'd spoken out and been silenced. She listened, her eyes darkening. So we weren't the first, she said, her voice cracking. No, Malcolm said. But we're gonna be the last. That night, Malcolm's phone rang at 2 a.m. He was dozing in the chair beside Lydia's bed, his neck stiff from the awkward angle. The number was blocked, the voice on the other end low and hurried. Harper, you don't know me, but I used to work with Morrow. He's done worse than what you saw. There's a woman, Tanya Green, filed a complaint 2 years ago. He threatened her to drop it. She's in Fayetteville now. Find her. She'll talk. The line went dead before Malcolm could ask questions. His heart raced, the darkness of the room closing in. He scribbled the name Tanya Green on a napkin, his hands shaking. This was a crack in the wall. He texted Nathan. Got a lead. Tanya Green. Fayetteville. Says Morrow threatened her. Nathan replied instantly, on it. Meet me at the 24-hour diner on Market Street. 3 m. Malcolm kissed Lydia's forehead, careful not to wake her, and slipped out of the room. The diner was a neon-lit relic, its booths worn but clean. The air thick with the smell of bacon and burnt coffee. Nathan was already there, his laptop open, a stack of papers beside him. Tanya Green, he said as Malcolm slid into the booth. Found her. She's 29, works at a community center. Filed a complaint in 2023 after Morrow roughed her up during a traffic stop. Claimed he twisted her arm, called her names, threatened to arrest her if she didn't behave. She dropped the complaint a week later. Why'd she drop it? Malcolm asked, though he already knew the answer. Fear, Nathan said. Morrow showed up at her apartment. Off duty. Made it clear what would happen if she kept talking. Malcolm's stomach twisted. We need her to testify. Nathan nodded. I've got her number. She's skittish, but she might talk if we can guarantee protection. You up for a drive to Fayetteville? They left the diner at 4 a.m., the city still asleep under a blanket of stars. Malcolm drove, his old Ford pickup rattling along I-40 while Nathan worked the phone, coordinating with Clara and their research team. The road was empty, the headlights cutting through the dark, but Malcolm's nerves were on edge. Halfway to Fayetteville, he noticed a black SUV trailing them, its lights too close. He sped up. The SUV matched his pace. He slowed down, it lingered, just out of reach. You see that? Malcolm asked, his voice tight. Nathan glanced in the side mirror. Yeah. Keep driving. Don't stop. Malcolm's grip tightened on the wheel, his marine instincts kicking in. He took a random exit, weaving through a gas station parking lot, then back onto the highway. The SUV followed for a mile, then peeled off, its taillights vanishing into the night. Malcolm's heart pounded, but he didn't say anything. Neither did Nathan. They both knew what it meant someone was watching. Tanya Green met them at a quiet coffee shop in Fayetteville, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds. She was small, with tight braids and a guarded expression, her hands wrapped around a mug she didn't drink from. I don't want trouble, she said, her voice low. I moved here to get away from him. We're not here to bring trouble, Malcolm said, his tone gentle but firm. We're here because he hurt my wife. She's pregnant. He kicked her in the stomach. We need to stop him. Tanya's eyes widened, then dropped to the table. I saw the video, she whispered. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Nathan said. Be loud. Tell us what he did to you. We can protect you. She hesitated, her fingers trembling. Then slowly she spoke. Morrow had pulled her over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. When she questioned him, he yanked her out of the car, twisted her arm until she cried out, and told her she'd regret it if she didn't shut up. A week later, he showed up at her apartment, no uniform, just a smirk and a warning: drop the complaint, or I'll make sure you lose everything. She dropped it. She moved. She tried to forget. I'll testify, she said finally, her voice shaking but resolute. But you better make sure he doesn't come for me. We will, Malcolm promised, though he knew it was a promise he couldn't fully keep. The drive back to Wilmington was silent, the weight of Tanya's story settling over them. The SUV didn't reappear, but Malcolm couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When they reached the hospital, Clara was waiting, her face lit with a rare smile. Tanya's testimony is gold, she said. We've got another witness to a store clerk who saw Morrow harass a kid last year. We're building a case, Malcolm. A big one. But the bigger the case grew, the harder the system pushed back. That afternoon, Clara organized a press conference on the hospital steps. A podium set up under the shade of an oak tree. Reporters from Charlotte, Raleigh, even CNN crowded around, their cameras rolling. Malcolm stood beside Clara, his hands clasped to keep them from shaking. Lydia watched from her room, her TV tuned to the live feed. Clara stepped to the microphone, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. This isn't about one officer, she said, holding up a thick folder. This is about a culture of negligence, a pattern of protection for those who abuse power. We have evidence, complaints, memos, witness statements that show Travis Morrow was a known problem. And the Wilmington PD did nothing. The crowd, out nearly 300 strong, cheered, their signs waving. But not everyone was there to support. A group of counter-protesters, maybe 20 strong, pushed to the edge of the gathering. They wore trucker hats and carried signs, support our cops. Due process matters. One man, red-faced and burly, shouted, you're lying. She provoked him. The crowd tensed, the air crackling with hostility. Malcolm stepped forward, his voice steady. My wife was walking home, he said, his words amplified by the microphone. She was carrying oranges for me. She told him she was pregnant, and he kicked her anyway. That's not provocation. That's brutality. The cheers drowned out the hecklers, but the tension didn't break. A man in the counter-protest group, his eyes wild, hurled a plastic water bottle toward the podium. It missed Malcolm, striking a reporter in the shoulder. The crowd gasped, some surging forward, others pulling back. Security guards rushed in, separating the groups, but the damage was done. The cameras caught it all, the bottle, the chaos, Malcolm's unflinching stance. Clara grabbed the microphone. This is what they're afraid of, she said, her voice rising. They can't silence us, so they try to scare us. But we're not scared. Are you? The crowd roared, their voices a wall of sound. Malcolm looked out at them, his heart pounding. He saw faces he didn't know, young, old, black, white, Latino, all united by a single truth. This had to stop. He turned to Clara, his voice low. We need to go bigger. She nodded. We will. That night, back in Lydia's room, Malcolm scrolled through the news coverage. Headlines blazed. Wilmington PD under fire after viral brutality video. Husband of attacked pregnant woman calls for accountability. Press conference disrupted by pro-police protesters. The bottle-throwing incident was everywhere, fueling the outrage. But so were the lies. New posts on X claimed Lydia had a violent history, that Malcolm was exploiting her pain for fame. The police union issued a statement calling the public's reaction dangerous rhetoric and defending Morrow's years of service. Malcolm's phone buzzed with another anonymous message. You're digging your own grave, Harper. He deleted it, but the words lingered. He looked at Lydia, who was asleep, her hand resting on her belly. She was the reason he kept going, the reason he couldn't stop. But the threats were piling up, and the system was closing ranks. He texted Clara. We need to move fast. They're not gonna wait. The next morning, the crowd outside the hospital had grown again, now spilling into the street. A local church brought food, volunteers handed out blankets, and a group of high schoolers painted a mural on a bedsheet, Lydia's Light. Malcolm stepped outside, the megaphone heavy in his hand. This isn't just about my wife, he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. It's about every woman who's been pushed down, every family told to stay quiet. We're not quiet anymore. Are you? The roar that followed shook the ground. Malcolm felt it in his Bonisa movement, a reckoning. But he knew the system was watching, waiting for a misstep. The fight was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. The Wilmington courthouse stood like a monolith under the October sky, its stone facade cold and unyielding. Inside, the air was heavy, not with humidity but with something harder to name: anticipation, fear, hope. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with a cross-section of the city. Community organizers in bright dashikis, reporters scribbling furiously, students clutching notebooks, and a few off-duty officers trying to blend into the back row. The gallery buzzed with whispers, but when Malcolm and Lydia Harper entered, hand in hand, the room fell silent. Malcolm, 35, wore a dark suit that felt too tight, his marine-honed posture masking the exhaustion in his eyes. Lydia, 27, walked slowly, her pregnancy now a quiet triumph, her face still bearing faint scars from that day on the sidewalk. Their presence was a statement. They were here, unbroken, demanding to be seen. It had taken months to reach this moment. Months of depositions, protests, press conferences, and sleepless nights. The city had tried to settle, offering money, apologies, promises of reform, but Malcolm and Lydia hadn't come for quick fixes. They'd come for truth. And now in courtroom 3B, that truth was on trial. Travis Morrow sat at the defense table, his gray suit ill-fitting, his once smug demeanor replaced by a calculated stillness. He didn't look at Lydia, didn't acknowledge the crowd. But Malcolm saw the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped the table. Morrow wasn't in control anymore. The prosecution opened with the video that had shaken Wilmington. Projected on a large screen, the 40-second clip played in stark silence, no music, no commentary, just the raw brutality of that September afternoon. Lydia walking with her bag of oranges, Morrow's cruiser screeching to a stop, the shove, the kick, her scream piercing the quiet. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, even from those who'd seen it 100 times online. Under the courtroom's fluorescent lights, with the judge's gavel resting nearby, the footage hit harder, its truth undeniable. The jury, 7 women, 5 men, a mix of ages and races, leaned forward, some covering their mouths, others scribbling notes. Malcolm didn't watch the screen. He watched Lydia, her hand trembling in his, her eyes fixed on her lap. He squeezed her fingers gently, a silent promise. "We're here. We're doing this." She squeezed back, her strength a quiet fire that had carried them through the chaos of the past months. The prosecution called their first witness, the teenage boy who'd filmed the attack. Jamal, 16, shuffled to the stand, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. He spoke softly, his voice cracking as he described seeing Lydia fall, hearing her scream. "I just kept recording," he said, his eyes darting to Morrow. "I knew no one would believe it if I didn't." The defense tried to discredit him, claiming the video was edited or lacked context, but Jamal held firm, his testimony a small act of courage that set the tone. Next came Tanya Green, the woman Malcolm and Nathan had tracked down in Fayetteville. She walked to the stand with her head high, her braids swaying, but her hands shook as she swore her oath. Her story was chilling: Morrow's harassment during a traffic stop, his threats at her apartment, the fear that drove her to drop her complaint and flee. "I didn't want to be here," she admitted, her voice steady despite her nerves. "But when I saw what he did to Mrs. Harper, I knew I had to speak. He can't keep doing this." The jury listened, their faces tight. Malcolm saw one juror, an older black woman, wipe a tear from her cheek. Tanya's words weren't just about her, they were about every person who'd been silenced, every story buried. The defense pushed back, suggesting Tanya had misremembered or exaggerated, but her clarity cut through their tactics like a blade. Then it was Lydia's turn. Malcolm stood as she approached the stand, her steps slow but deliberate. She wore a simple blue dress, her belly a quiet testament to her survival. She took her oath, sat down, and let out a breath so deep it seemed to pull the room's air with it. The prosecutor, a young woman with a sharp gaze, began gently. "Mrs. Harper, can you tell us what happened on September 12th? Lydia's voice was soft but clear, each word carrying the weight of her pain. "I was walking home from the library," she said. "I had a bag of oranges for my husband. I was thinking about dinner, about our baby. I saw a truck swerve close to me and I dropped the oranges. I was picking them up when Officer Morrow stopped. He said I was loitering, causing trouble. I told him I was just going home. I told him I was pregnant." Her voice faltered, but she pressed on. "He didn't care. He pushed me. I fell. And then he kicked me in the stomach." The courtroom was still, the kind of silence that follows a truth too raw to process. Lydia's hand moved to her belly, an instinctive shield even now. "I thought I'd lost my baby," she said, her eyes glistening. "I lay there praying while people filmed. No one helped. Not until the ambulance came." She paused, her gaze lifting to the jury. I'm not here for me. I'm here because if I don't speak, someone else will be next. Malcolm's chest tightened, pride and heartbreak colliding. Lydia wasn't just a victim, she was a survivor. A witness, a force. The jury felt it too, their eyes locked on her, some nodding faintly. The defense tried to twist her story, claiming she'd been uncooperative or raised her voice. But their questions fell flat. Lydia's truth was a wall they couldn't breach. The prosecution closed with a nurse from the ER and Lydia's OB-GYN who detailed the risks of the attack: placental abruption, premature labor, potential loss of the baby. Their testimony was clinical but devastating, a reminder of how close Lydia had come to losing everything. The defense's closing argument leaned on procedure, claiming Morrow had felt threatened and acted in a split-second decision. But the jury's faces told a different story. They'd seen too much, heard too much, felt too much. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreperson, a middle-aged white woman, stood, her voice steady. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis Morrow, guilty on all counts: excessive force, assault, reckless endangerment, and civil rights violations. Malcolm exhaled, his body sagging into the bench. Lydia covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, some clapping, others whispering prayers. Morrow's face was stone, but his hands gripped the table, his knuckles white. The judge set sentencing for the following week, but the word guilty was enough for now. It was a crack in the system. A moment of accountability in a city that had seen too little of it. Malcolm and Lydia left the courtroom through a sea of cameras, their hands still clasped. Reporters shouted questions, but Malcolm paused only once, his voice firm. This isn't the end, he said. It's the beginning. Because what happened to Lydia happens every day, and most don't get a jury. We're changing that. The sentencing hearing was quieter, the courtroom less crowded but no less tense. Morrow entered in shackles, his suit replaced by a prison jumpsuit. The judge, a stern man with silver hair, read victim impact statements first. Lydia's was simple but piercing. You tried to take my child, my peace, my humanity. But you didn't break me. You made me fight. Tanya Green's statement followed, her words a vow to never be silenced again. A third statement came from a community leader who'd filed a complaint against Morrow years ago, only to see it buried. The judge looked at Morrow for a long moment before speaking. You violated your oath to protect, he said. You chose violence over duty, silence over accountability. This court sentences you to 5 years in prison with no parole. Your law enforcement certification is revoked, and your pension is forfeited. The gavel fell, a final note in a song that had taken months to write. Lydia leaned into Malcolm, her voice a whisper. It's over. He shook his head gently. It's just beginning. Outside, the news spread like wildfire. Headlines blazed. Wilmington officer convicted in pregnant woman's assault. Lydia Harper's victory shakes city. Justice served in brutality case. The crowd outside the courthouse cheered, their signs now joined by balloons and flowers. Malcolm and Lydia stepped into the sunlight, the cameras flashing, but Lydia spoke this time. I didn't think I'd see this day, she said, her voice soft but steady. I didn't think people like me got justice in rooms like that. But today we did. And I hope it opens the door for the next person. They didn't linger. They didn't need to. The message had landed. Weeks later, life shifted to a new rhythm. Lydia was home now, her nursery ready, her strength returning. One quiet Sunday she went into labor. Malcolm drove her to the hospital, his hand steady despite the fear in his chest. There were no protests this time, no cameras, just a husband and wife navigating pain and hope. Labor was long, exhausting, but Malcolm never left her side. He held her hand, whispered through every contraction, reminded her she was stronger than the world knew. When their son arrived, crying and perfect, Malcolm felt something crack open inside him. He held the boy, tears streaming down his face. He's here, he whispered. We made it. They named him Hope, not for what they'd won, but for what they'd refused to lose. In the months that followed, Malcolm and Lydia built something lasting. With Clara and Nathan, they founded the Harper Initiative for Justice, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting victims of police violence. Its office, a small storefront in Wilmington's South Side, buzzed with live volunteers answering phones, lawyers drafting complaints, counselors offering free sessions. The walls were covered with notes from survivors, photos of protests, and a mural of Lydia painted by local teens. The initiative pushed for the Harper Act, a state bill mandating independent oversight of police complaints and body camera transparency. It wasn't law yet, but it was gaining traction, a testament to their refusal to stop. Hope's first birthday was a celebration of more than a child. The Harpers hosted a block party in their neighborhood, strings of lights crisscrossing the street, jazz and gospel filling the air. Neighbors brought collard greens and cornbread, kids chased balloons, and a local band played under the stars. Clara gave a toast, her glass raised to Lydia's courage. Nathan grilled ribs, joking about his secret sauce. Even a few city council members showed up, not for votes but to listen. Malcolm stood before the crowd, hope strapped to his chest, his voice steady. "Justice isn't a place you arrive," he said. "It's a choice you make every day. We didn't ask for this fight, but we're in it for hope for all of them." The applause was warm, honest, a sound that carried beyond the street. Lydia stood beside him, her smile quiet but radiant. Later, as the party wound down, they sat together on their porch, Hope asleep in Lydia's arms. "You okay?" she asked, her head resting on Malcolm's shoulder. "Yeah," he said, his voice soft. "For the first time in a long time, I think I am." The Harper Initiative grew, its reach extending beyond Wilmington. They helped a family in Durham file a wrongful arrest suit, trained young activists in Raleigh to navigate City Hall, and partnered with maternal health advocates to support Black mothers like Lydia. The city felt different now, not perfect, but awake. New voices rose where silence once lived, new eyes watched where injustice once thrived. Malcolm and Lydia weren't just survivors. They were builders, planting seeds for a world their son could inherit. One crisp fall evening, Malcolm spoke at a community forum, Hope toddling at his feet. "This started on a sidewalk," he said, his voice carrying over the packed room. "But it's not ending there. Because every time we speak, every time we stand, we're making room for the next voice, the next fight. And that's what hope is." Lydia watched from the front row, her eyes shining. She thought of that day on 4th Street, the oranges scattered, the pain that nearly broke her. But she also thought of Hope's laugh, Malcolm's strength, the hands that had lifted them up. They hadn't just survived. They reshaped the world, one truth at a time. The Wilmington winter settled in with a quiet chill, the kind that seeped into your bones but left the sky clear, a brittle blue stretching over the city's historic streets. It was February 2026, 5 months since Travis Morrow's conviction, and the air still carried the echo of that day on 4th Street. For Malcolm and Lydia Harper, life had become a delicate balance of healing and fighting, of raising their son, hope, and building a movement that refused to fade. The Harper Initiative for Justice, once a small storefront dream, was now a beacon in Wilmington's South Side, its windows glowing late into the night, its walls lined with stories of survival and defiance. But the work was far from done. The system, bruised but unbroken, was watching, waiting, and pushing back in ways they hadn't expected. Malcolm stood in the initiative's office, his breath fogging in the early morning cold. The heat was finicky, but the space hummed with purpose: volunteers sorting files, a lawyer on the phone with a family in Raleigh, a counselor leading a support group in the back room. A mural of Lydia, painted by local teens, stared down from the wall, her eyes fierce but kind, oranges scattered at her feet like symbols of resilience. Malcolm traced the mural with his gaze, his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. Hope, now 14 months old, toddled nearby, clutching a toy truck, his laughter a bright note in the room's quiet chaos. Lydia was at a maternal health conference in Charlotte, speaking to doulas and midwives about the risks Black mothers faced. She'd found her voice, not just as a survivor but as a guide, and Malcolm couldn't have been prouder. But pride didn't erase the weight he carried. The Harper Initiative had grown beyond Wilmington, its name whispered in community centers from Durham to Atlanta. They'd helped a teenager in Fayetteville win a wrongful arrest case, trained dozens of activists to navigate city council meetings, and pushed the Harper Act, a bill mandating independent police oversight and body camera transparency, closer to a state Senate vote. But growth came with enemies. Anonymous threats still arrived, slipped under the office door or buried in Malcolm's inbox. "You're making waves, Harper. Waves drown people." A brick had shattered their window 2 weeks ago, the word traitor scrawled in red paint. The police called it vandalism, Malcolm called it a warning. He was reviewing a new case, Philly, a mother in Greensboro claiming her son was beaten during a traffic stop, when his phone buzzed with a call from Clara Mitchell. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "Malcolm, we've got a problem. Meet me at the office in an hour. Bring Nathan." Clara's tone set Malcolm's nerves on edge. He scooped up Hope, dropped him at their neighbors, and drove to the initiative's office, the city waking around him. Wilmington was different now, not softer, but more alert. The protests had quieted, but their impact lingered in the new faces at town halls, the questions asked at police briefings, the murals popping up on brick walls. Malcolm felt it, a pulse of change, but he also felt the resistance, the system's stubborn refusal to bend. Clara and Nathan were waiting in the office, their faces grim. Clara slid a folder across the desk. "This came from a source in the state police," she said. "They're investigating the initiative, claiming we're inciting unrest with our work on the Harper Act. They're digging for dirt, financials, communications, anything to discredit us." Malcolm's stomach dropped. "They're coming for us?" "Not just us," Nathan said, leaning against the wall. "They're targeting our ally community groups, churches, even the lawyers we've worked with. It's a coordinated push to shut us down before the bill hits the Senate floor." Malcolm opened the folder, his eyes scanning the documents, emails from state officials, memos about monitoring the initiative, a list of key figures, with his and Lydia's names at the top. "This is retaliation," he said, his voice low. "We got Morrow locked up, so now they're hitting us where it hurts." Clara nodded. "They're scared. The Harper Act could change how policing works in the state. They're not gonna let it pass without a fight." Malcolm's mind raced. He thought of Lydia, speaking in Charlotte, unaware of this new threat. He thought of Hope, his fearless laugh, his tiny hands reaching for the world. He thought of the families they'd helped, the stories still waiting to be told. "What's our move?" he asked. "We fight smarter," Nathan said. "We go public, all their bluff. Show the world what they're doing. And we need to protect our people. That means security, legal backup, and a louder voice." Clara agreed. "I've got a contact at the New York Times. They're interested in the initiative. A feature could put pressure on the state, make it harder for them to move against us." Malcolm nodded, his resolve hardening. "Do it. But we're not just defending ourselves. We're pushing forward. The Harper Act, the cases, all of it." That night, Malcolm called Lydia, filling her in on the investigation. Her voice was steady, but he heard the fear beneath it. "They're not gonna stop, are they?" she asked. "No," he said. "But neither are we." The next day, Malcolm and Clara held a community forum at a local church, its pews packed with over 300 people, families, activists, even a few skeptical cops in plainclothes. The air was thick with anticipation, the stained glass windows casting colored light across the crowd. Malcolm stood at the pulpit, a microphone in hand, hope on his hip. "They're coming for us," he said, his voice carrying over the room. "They're saying we're troublemakers, that we're breaking the peace. But let me tell you something, peace isn't silence. Peace is justice. And we're not stopping until every family in this city, this state, this country can walk home without fear." The crowd rose, their applause shaking the rafters. A woman in the front row, her hair gray and her eyes fierce, shouted, "We're with you, Malcolm." Others joined in, their voices a chorus of defiance. Lydia, back from Charlotte, stood at the side, her smile quiet but proud. She'd spoken earlier, sharing her work with maternal health advocates, her words a bridge between personal pain and collective hope. But the forum wasn't without tension. A man in a flannel shirt stood during the Q&A, his voice loud. "You're making it harder for cops to do their jobs," he said. "What about the good officers? You're painting us all as monsters." The room bristled, but Malcolm raised a hand, his voice calm. "I'm not here to fight good officers," he said. "I'm here to stop the bad ones. If you're one of the good ones, stand with us. Help us fix what's broken." The man sat down, his face unreadable, but the room exhaled, the moment diffused but not forgotten. The New York Times feature ran a week later, a 6-page spread titled, "The Harper's Fight, A Family's Quest for Justice." It detailed Lydia's attack, Morrow's conviction, and the initiative's work, but it also exposed the state's investigation, framing it as retaliation against a movement gaining momentum. The article went viral, shared by celebrities, activists, and everyday people. Donations poured in, volunteers signed up, and the Harper Act gained 2 new sponsors in the Senate. But the threats didn't stop. A late-night call to Malcolm's phone hissed, "You're playing with fire, Harper. Keep it up, and you'll burn." Malcolm didn't tell Lydia about the call. She was already carrying enough. Instead, he hired a security firm to watch the office in their home, a cost that strained their budget but gave him peace of mind. He and Lydia took turns reading to Hope each night, their voices soft over stories of trains and talking animals, a ritual that grounded them in the midst of the storm. One spring afternoon, the initiative hosted a training workshop for young activists, teaching them how to file complaints and speak at public meetings. The room was packed with teens and 20-somethings, their energy a spark that reminded Malcolm why he kept going. A girl, maybe 17, raised her hand. "How do you keep fighting when it feels like nothing changes?" she asked, her voice small but earnest. Malcolm paused, his eyes meeting hers. "It's not about seeing the change right away," he said. "It's about knowing someone's coming after you, someone who'll stand on what you built. You fight for them." The girl nodded, her face brightening. After the workshop, she handed Malcolm a drawing, a sketch of hope, his eyes wide and curious, surrounded by oranges. "For your son," she said. Malcolm thanked her, tucking the drawing into his wallet, a talisman against the darker days. Lydia's work grew too. Her maternal health advocacy had reached national attention, with invitations to speak in D.C. and Chicago. She partnered with a nonprofit to fund doulas for low-income Black mothers, ensuring they had support she'd been denied. At a conference in Atlanta, she stood before a crowd of 500, her voice steady. "I survived," she said. "But survival shouldn't be the goal. Thriving should be. That's what I'm fighting for my son. For your daughters, for us all." Back in Wilmington, the Harper Act faced its first Senate hearing. Malcolm and Lydia sat in the gallery, Hope on Lydia's lap, as Clara testified before the committee. "This bill isn't anti-police," she said. "It's pro-accountability. It's about making sure what happened to Lydia Harper never happens again." The hearing was contentious, with some senators questioning the bill's feasibility, but the public support bolstered by the Times article kept it alive. Outside, a rally of 1,000 people chanted, "Pass the Harper Act," their voices echoing through Raleigh streets. The fight wasn't over. The state's investigation continued, subpoenas looming. A new smear campaign surfaced, claiming the initiative misused funds, though audits proved otherwise. Malcolm and Lydia faced it all, their hands clasped, their eyes on the horizon. They knew the system wouldn't break easily, but they also knew it wasn't unbreakable. One quiet evening, they sat on their porch, Hope asleep upstairs. The stars were bright, the air warm with the promise of summer. "We're still here," Lydia said, her head on Malcolm's shoulder. "Yeah," he said, his voice soft. "And we're not going anywhere." They'd walked through fire, but now they were lighting torches for others. The Harper Initiative wasn't just an office, it was a legacy, a promise that one voice, one truth, could change the world. And as Hope grew, his laughter filling their home, Malcolm and Lydia knew they were building something that would outlast them, something that would carry their son, their city, their country forward. All right, folks, let's take a breather after that roller coaster of a story. Malcolm and Lydia Harper didn't just walk through fire, they lit a torch for the rest of us. And here's the kicker. Their fight isn't some dusty history lesson from 2025 Wilmington. It's a mirror held up to our world right now. In 2025, we're still scrolling X, seeing videos of injustice pop up like unwanted ads, and wondering, when's this gonna stop? Spoiler alert. It stops when we stop scrolling and start standing up, just like the Harpers did. Now let's get real. We've all had that moment, maybe not a sidewalk showdown, but a time when we saw something wrong and had to choose. Speak up or stay quiet. Maybe it was a coworker getting unfairly chewed out, a neighbor facing eviction, or just a stranger getting the short end of the stick. The Harpers teach us that silence is comfy, sure, but it's also the system's best friend. So here's the lesson, served with a side of sass. Don't be the guy who films the drama and calls it a day. Be the Malcolm who picks up the megaphone, or the Lydia who turns pain into purpose. And no, you don't need a law degree or a viral video, just a spine and a heart. Here's a little chuckle for you. Fighting injustice is like trying to fix a leaky faucet with a paper towel. It's messy, it's frustrating, and you'll probably get wet. But keep at it and you might just stop the flood. Malcolm and Lydia didn't fix the world, but they tightened a few pipes, and Hope's growing up in a house with a little less dripping. So what's your leaky faucet? What's one small thing you can do today to make your corner of the world fairer? Drop it in the comments, I'm dying to hear your ideas. And while you're at it, tell me, where are you tuning in from and what time's it there? Let's make this a global block party. Before you go, hit that subscribe button faster than Malcolm chased justice. Our channel's packed with stories like this, raw, real, and ready to spark something in you. Don't miss out on the next one, because trust me, we're just getting started. Like, share, and let's keep the Harper's torch burning. Who's with me?